Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. And welcome back. I hope your week was outstanding. And we're glad that you're joining us on a lovely and incredible Friday. We made it. Had a busy week here, but we're not done yet. We have a burner to unpack here together. We're talking about Brad Raffensberger, the Secretary of State out of Georgia. He has a whole team of people who are alongside him colluding to cover up for the 2020 election. And now his general counsel, his lawyer, the main lawyer who defended all of his corrupt actions, Charlene McGowan, is getting hit with a banger of a bar complaint. We'll take a look at it. Comes from our friend Kevin Monla, who's been on this case for a long time, and we'll see exactly what the depravity looks like and what she'll be facing in defense of this complaint. Then we'll talk about what happened in Arizona. We've been talking about the battle between Justin Heap, the new county recorder, and the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and how the outgoing county recorder, the last guy, Stephen Richer, who basically shoveled off all of the county recorder's responsibilities over to the Board of Supervisors on his way out to divest the incoming county recorder of any of the evidence of his 2020 shenanigans. Well, he just got crushed. The entire ordeal has now been settled by the Arizona Superior Court in Maricopa County, issuing a monster decision today, and we'll unpack it all together here. We're very glad that you're here and with us. Hopefully, we're coming through loud and clear all across the fruited plain of the interwebs, confirming that the tubes have connected themselves, and it looks like things are working. We always appreciate that. All right, so now, without any further ado, let's get right into it on the day. Charlene McGowan, the woman you see right here, now facing a massive bar complaint. And she may come into your memory for being a part of Brad Raffensberger's team. You see, this is the Georgia Secretary of State website, Brad Raffensberger right here. The same guy who was on that phone call with President Trump talking about find the 11,000 votes. The same guy who ran one of the worst elections in American history in 2020 out there in Georgia. He had a whole team of people who was helping him at the time cover up for their bad activities. And one woman, Charlene McGowan, is the general counsel, the main lawyer for Brad. Brad didn't do a lot of the talking. He sent his deputies to go out and engage in the various complaints and the various Senate hearings. We see McGowan was in this article all the way back going to 2023. You see, this was written back November 1, 2023. After the 2020 election, the state Senate passed and was signed into law major updates to fix some of the election problems, including the QR code problem that resulted in mismatched numbers of ballots, and they had recounts, they had deleted ballot images, they had duplicate ballots, they had a huge list of problems. And at every hearing, we would get the crew that would come out. There's Dolezal, and this is Charlene McGowan. So she would come in and testify on behalf of the Secretary of State's office. And she was so pernicious that she also went to testify against other lawyers who dared to challenge the 2020 election. Earlier this week, we talked about John Eastman, an American hero who gave advice to the president about how to handle the legal maneuvering after the 2020 election. And in California, they took his license away. People like Charlene went out and were witnesses for the various bars, and she was arguing that they should lose their license. Now, she's getting hit with a monster complaint, and this is a doozy. You can see it's 31 pages. We're going to go into it and see exactly what the allegations are. But it's part of the Raffensberger team and the Raffensberger cover-up. And this was brought to us courtesy of Kevin Monla. He has been on this many times before here on this channel, an election investigator and a consultant, says he respects the will of the people. He doesn't care who wins. He just cares that we have fair elections that are operated with integrity. And he brings this complaint to us courtesy of a lot of effort And he's tagging many people, including Harmeet Dillon, Civil Rights Division, FBI Atlanta, Eagle Ed Martin, and more. Senator Perdue. He writes, "This is my bar complaint of the Georgia Secretary of State's General Counsel called Charlene McGowan. She perjured herself," he says, "in the bar trials of 3 other lawyers." Now, I did not file this complaint without serious thought, and I felt that I had to. Miss McGowan made attestations of fact and law in legal filings on behalf of Brad Raffensberger, the sole signatory, and then gave testimony under oath in DC bar trials stating the opposite. So would say one thing in one forum, then go and make up another story in another forum. I believe that's called a felony, Judge Janine, both under DC and federal law. But Dr. John Eastman gets disbarred. He loses his license, and Charlene McGowan is now being considered for appointment to the bench, which is the same pattern that we've seen in Georgia in general. We know that other people like Vic Reynolds from the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, when he was prompted to actually do his job and conduct an investigation courtesy of the then Senator David Perdue, what did he say? He said, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that. Can't help you out on that one because the governor, Brian Kemp, told me to be a team player and close the investigation." He got promoted from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation up to a judge. Same thing happened with Judge McAfee, who donated to Fannie Willis's campaign, was also a lead investigator in the 2020 election. He also got a promotion. So she's on the same trajectory. You help cover up for the election, boom, you get a promotion for an indefinite, essentially permanent position as a judge. So not so fast. He says, "I say this with complete understanding of the resulting potential liabilities, and I make the same with complete conviction. Charlene McGowan has gone to great lengths, unlawful and criminal, to conceal and to obstruct the proper investigation of the 2020 general and the resulting Senate runoff elections." And now we have 2 blue senators out of Georgia. Concealment and false exculpatory statements are used to establish consciousness of guilt, and the resulting injuries and harm to individuals like Dr. John Eastman is extremely far-reaching. And we see this complaint right here. And let's make sure we've got our big, beautiful red pen out so we can mark this document up appropriately. This was submitted in a bar complaint over to back to the state bar grievance and petition for an emergency suspension. And we're getting this here courtesy of Kevin Monla, April 16th, 2026. He says, "This complaint is now to formally lodge allegations of professional misconduct against Charlene. She's currently the general counsel for Brad Raffensberger and the former assistant attorney general. The following is the basis for the complaint. Detailing multiple instances where Charlene knowingly made false statements under oath, illegal, regarding the 2020 election and the events surrounding it in direct contravention of her professional and ethical obligations." Now, Ms. McGowan, acting in her official capacity as the Secretary of State's lawyer, Raffensperger's general counsel, she testified under oath before the Washington, D.C. Disciplinary Board back in September 30th, 2024, once again, October 1, 24, involving 3 different lawyers who were all being questioned about the 2020 election work. Now, the facts of the 2020 election that are detailed herein are at odds with Charlene's sworn testimony. So some things are being said in one location and different testimony elsewhere. And the facts just are in opposite of what she's actually testifying to. So maybe she's lying. Ms. McGowan attempted to portray the 2020 election, the hand count and the audit, and the recount as credible, valid, and whole, but it simply wasn't. And frankly, neither was her testimony. Instead, Ms. McGowan knowingly made false statements under oath about the election, about the risk limiting audit, about the candidate requested recount. She made up stuff about Georgia law and the disposition of various election board complaints. She also authenticated records, said these are true, that she knew to be false, knowing that they were incorrect, and her testimony was used to enter those false records into evidence. And for this, she's going to get a promotion. So she abused her position as the lawyer for Brad Raffensberger. And Raffensberger knew all this, and he was just endorsing her. He didn't want to go out and say it himself. So he sends her out to go do his bidding, saying that she is an officer of the court. She's a lawyer. She's making patently false statements of fact and law, which were used to conceal the facts surrounding the 2020 election and falsely bolster the case against these three lawyers. So here's some of the counts. And we've got a real beautiful accounting of this, including testimony from the various complaints and the trials. You can see Kevin Monla did his homework on this one, saying she falsely testified that she was unaware of any corroborated findings that the county had failed to preserve election records. Ms. McGowan, did you know that these weren't preserved? No, I have no idea. Yes, she did. When asked about the allegation that Fulton County destroyed the ballot images for in-person voting, McGowan acknowledges that she is aware of the allegation, but then falsely claims that other than this one complaint, she is not aware of any corroborated findings that a county has failed to preserve the ballot images. She says this. Mr. Byrne asks her in a trial, in a hearing, says, okay, Ms. McGowan, you're the general counsel for Brad Raffensberger, who ran the election. There were 374,000 plus in-person ballot images for the original count that are missing. Okay, 374,000 ballots. And these are images that should be scanned, and they should match exactly the physical ballots, right? The ballots get scanned in, the machine creates an image and then uses that image to do analysis on the image and then spits out a result. Are you aware of that allegation? She says, yeah, well, that is again an allegation that has been made. Okay. Then in October says, RK, are you aware of any material that has been destroyed or not kept? She says, I'm not aware of any documents being destroyed, nor I'm not aware, other than one particular investigation that we just talked about, I'm not aware of any other corroborated findings that a county has failed to preserve certain election documents. Now, this is problematic for a couple of reasons. First, she includes two qualifiers. She limits incidents to corroborated findings. Second, she says, oh, no, it's only about that one particular investigation. However, as it pertains to missing ballot images, the complaint is limited to 17,800 ballot images missing from the candidate requested recount, which is a separate section. He'll get to that later. She clearly says she's not aware of any other corroborated findings. Now, despite her contention to the contrary, she knows, no, I'm not aware. No, you know that Fulton County did destroy 374,000 ballot images for nearly all of the in-person voting for the November 3rd, 2020 recount. Just think about that. How many ballots that is. The margin of error in Georgia was about 11,800 votes. So in response to a request for admissions filed in a separate case called Curling versus Raffensberger, Fulton County admitted this. So it's corroborated by Fulton County, the county. They admitted in another lawsuit that they failed to preserve the majority of ballot images from in-person voting for November 3rd in the original machine count. And remember, there's a lot of argument that the perversion happened in the machines, that when you scan the ballot in, it does its analysis and spits out a QR code. You take that QR code, the QR code goes and you scan it somewhere else, and the QR code translates what was on the image into your vote. Now, you can't read the QR code, so you don't know what the hell it just spit out to you. And then you go and you scan it and it counts the votes. So you'd like to reconcile that. Okay, you fill out a paper ballot, scan it. You'd like to see whether it all matches, whether it's all one-to-one. But they deleted it. 374,000 of those. Here's what came out in the lawsuit. Says, admit that you did not preserve until the present time the majority of the ballot images from in-person voting and on the election machine's original counts. Response, admitted. Okay, so they admit they did not preserve and they don't have them. Seen here in the lawsuit, request for admission. We want you to admit you didn't preserve these, says admitted. Oh, well, she's the lawyer. This is a case involving Brad Raffensberger. So why is she saying in separate testimony that she has no idea that any of this was not corroborated? It's clearly corroborated because they admitted it right there in the filing. Now, plainly stated, Ms. McGowan knew that it was not just an allegation that has been made, okay? In fact, it was a violation of both state and federal law. They have record retention laws, and Fulton County confirmed it. They admitted it. It's not casual hearsay admissions. It's not a rumor. It's not somebody just popping off on a podcast somewhere. This is an official affirmative admission. This was filed in a federal court case. Her client is the defendant. And Fulton County's admission is the very corroboration upon which she qualified her response and is analogous to the confession of a murder suspect who turned himself in along with a murder weapon and video of the crime. Okay, that's corroboration. It simply doesn't get any better. We love the murder weapon analogy here. Now, moreover, Brad Raffensberger's lawyer called Charlene, she knows that the ballot images from nearly half of the approximate 5 million ballots cast across the state of Georgia on November 3rd, 2020 were destroyed. Based on a statewide effort by Voter GA, 74 of Georgia's 159 counties failed to produce the ballot images from the November 3rd, 2024 count. 56 of those provided written admissions that they all failed to preserve the images. So it's not even up for debate. Now, her statement that she is not aware of any corroborated findings, therefore, is verifiably and materially false. She knew. She was the general counsel for Bragg. She goes in, testifies in one hearing. No, I have no idea what you're talking about. Never heard of that. It's not corroborated at all. Yes, it is. Fulton County corroborated it. So count two. She also falsely testified, aka lied, that Georgia law did not require the preservation of the ballot images. So, well, we didn't need to. We didn't need to keep them. Following 2020, it was discovered that Fulton County failed to preserve the ballot images for all of the in-person voting for the November 3rd general election in violation of federal and state law. Then on October 1, 2024, fast forward 4 years, we're still hashing this out. Ms. McGowan went to the Washington, D.C. Bar Disciplinary Panel, wants to go testify against other lawyers, saying those other lawyers are making stuff up and they should lose their law license. Meanwhile, she's making stuff up. Says she testifies that the law did not require that the ballot images actually be preserved. Ms. McGowan testifies. The result was that ballot images were not required by law to be preserved in 2020 like they are now. And so it was not a finding of a legal violation of the law. But she knew that wasn't true. On April 2nd, 2021, Ms. McGowan, back then, was the Assistant Attorney General on behalf of the Secretary of State and the sole signatory to the document, filed an amicus brief in another parallel matter. In the case of Favorito versus Juan, Garland Favorito, another hero, in which she states the following as it pertains to 2020. So she goes and testifies in DC, says one thing. Turns out in another lawsuit, she said something completely different. She said this in the amicus, an amicus brief, says ballots are then scanned through optical voting scanners selected and furnished by Georgia. Once scanned, an electronic ballot image is created and stored on a memory card called a ballot image. Following the election, county officials must deliver all ballots and ballot images, physical and digital, so that they can reconcile with each other, in sealed containers to the clerk of the Superior Court. And those ballots and ballot images are to be held by the clerk under seal for a period of 24 months. Oh, so you do have to keep them. She went on to argue that the plaintiff should not be allowed to access the paper ballots, but instead only be provided the ballot images. Saying the secretary, she's filing an amicus like a friend of the court, saying this is our position on this, says the secretary respectfully requests the court permit the petitioners to inspect the ballot images only and deny petitioners' request to inspect and scan the ballots because they definitely don't. And the ballots now have been seized by the FBI and they're in their possession and they're desperately wanting to get them back because I think they know that they're not actually going to reconcile at all. And so she says, don't give them the paper ballots, give them the ballot images that are required under Georgia law to be maintained. Then she turns around and goes to DC and says they're not required to be maintained. So this attorney who was suing should have his law license stripped from him because he's making crap up. That we should have preserved the ballot images. She comes in and testifies under color of her title and says, I know the law. They're not required to be maintained. Well, that's weird because you submitted an amicus brief in which you said they do need to be maintained. She also said, based on the controlling law, the secretary respectfully requests that the motion to unseal only be requested and approved as to ballot images. That is what Georgia law says. That's consistent with the law. And it allows them to look at the images, which they know are mostly gone. She also cited case law that affirms that ballot images are to be preserved and maintained under seal. Explains it. Bunch of cases all cited here, talking about CD-ROMs and other things. She even admitted that the ballot images at issue were preserved and were being held by the clerk. She says that they're suing for enforcement actions under open records laws and all of that. She cites the Georgia law right there. So because of a prior challenge to Ms. McGowan by the state election board in a public hearing, she knew at the time of her testimony that county election superintendents were required to include a copy of the images with the election records to be preserved under seal. She also knew that rule was in effect for 2020. During a state election board meeting, Ms. McGowan testified, made the same statement that she said to the disciplinary board when she said, actually, the preservation of the ballot images was not required in 2020, which is weird because in writing, she said it was and cited case law. It was not until the passage of a new bill in 21 that then they were deemed to be public records, and then we have to save them. After that statement, the state election board member, Dr. Janice Johnston, she's amazing, publicly corrected the erroneous statements that Ms. McGowan was publicly stating as a result of the investigation. She said, Janice said, let's fix this little problem here. Said, all right, I'd like to read the rule about storage and returns. This rule was passed January 23rd, 2020, way before November. And it was made effective February 12th, 2020. After the new rule cited here, 183-1-12-.13. After tabulating and consolidating the results, the superintendent shall prepare the electronic file, which shall contain a copy of the information on each memory card and which shall include all ballot images, vote totals, copy of the consolidated returns, and more. And it shall be stored on a secure medium along with the tape and the paper ballots, and all of it bundles up and goes over to the clerk of the Superior Court. So she knew that, and it's on the books, like it's literally in the law. So thus, at the time of her testimony before the disciplinary board, so she goes up to DC and says, we didn't have to keep it. So these lawyers who said that we did are liars. They're making it up. No, she was. And she's trying to destroy them, okay? She's trying to take their licenses away so that they never investigate an election fraudulently stolen ever again. Ms. McGowan knew her statement to be false. She knew that Georgia law required the preservation of ballot images, and she knew that it was in effect for 2020. She filed briefs stating and had even been correcting when she tried to get away from that. So we cannot explain why she would do this. Well, because she's a team player, just like Brian Kemp wanted from Vic Reynolds. You go do this work, I'm going to make you a judge. A lawyer subject to disciplinary rules. She's an officer of the court. She's a government employee. Why would she knowingly lie to the state election board? Why would she knowingly lie to the DC bar? Her repeated false statements are clearly an effort to intentionally deceive, mislead, obstruct, and conceal very serious and material violations of both federal and state law. Law says you have to do this. She says, no, we don't, and goes and testifies accordingly, even though there's a whole record of her saying and confirming she does. She also falsely testified that another complaint was closed. She said falsely, says that the SEB complaint 2023-025 was resolved. She said one member on the board attempted to reopen the case, and the attorney general advised that the SEB did not have authority to reopen the case. She lied about the disposition of that case, misrepresented the facts around the investigation, and concealed material facts as the investigation continues. Here's what happened. She was asked about that case. It was filed by the undersigned, in this case, Kevin Monla and Joseph Rossi, back July 9, 2022. So McGowan then claimed that the case was investigated and that the findings were presented to the SEB, the state election board. She said this, quote, The state election board voted originally to resolve that case with a letter of reprimand to Fulton County, then claimed that there was one particular board member that was not happy with the result, and so that particular board member attempted to reopen the case. She says the Attorney General's office responded to that and said that there was no legal authority to reopen the case and to conduct any further investigation. False. Those assertions are not true. It's false that that was thoroughly investigated, false that the case was resolved with a letter of reprimand, and false that the AG said that there was no legal authority to reopen it at all. All made up. Not only did McGowan fail to tell the truth, also failed to tell the whole truth, she omitted a material fact that this happened on August 7, 2023, less than 2 months before her testimony. The SEB board voted to continue the investigation, and not one particular board member, but the board properly decided by a motion carried by the majority. So in other words, the whole board voted for this, not just one person. So first, this was not even thoroughly investigated. There were 4 basic allegations included in the complaint, none of which have ever been properly investigated. Here are some of the complaints. It says, 1, no credible records for 10 advanced voting tabulators and the 20,000 ballots that came from those tabulators, which they were attributed for the November 3rd count. Unresolved. Okay, said it was resolved. It's not. 20,000 ballots on this one. In response to the investigation, Fulton County produced 8 tabulator poll open tapes bearing the same serial number of other tabulators at the same location. So you want the tab poll tapes, right? You want to zero out your count and you want to make sure, we start counting at this level, at this number. We do the counts. We close it out at the other end. This is the work that we've done. Opening check, closing check. And then you can validate what you've done. But they gave them the same poll tapes with the same serial numbers of other locations' tabulator devices. Okay, so 2 tabulator poll closing tapes from machines other than those which actually scanned the ballots. So like other random machines that didn't even do any work. Like every one of Fulton County's 138 advanced voting tabulator poll closing tapes, the official returns for some 320,000 or 3/5 of all ballots cast. The 2 poll closing tapes produced were fraudulent, they were unsigned, they were unwitnessed, and they were uncertified. All of that's required under the law. Another complaint. We got 17,800 missing ballot images from the recount. The Secretary of State, Brad Raffensberger, along with Charlene McGowan, their investigation failed to locate any of the missing ballot images, and Ms. McGowan tried to prevent the state election board from confirming the same by refusing to provide access to the records obtained by Fulton County. McGowan also falsely stated that the preservation of ballot images was not required, even though she knew that they were. Another issue, 3,100 ballots were intentionally scanned and counted more than once. Similarly, unresolved. They actually did confirm that those were double counted from the secretary's office, but then she falsely claimed that it was inconclusive if they were actually counted. The complainants in the original complaint, they also provided irrefutable evidence showing that not only were the 3,100 ballots not only counted twice, but were individually selected to be counted twice, intentionally scanned for a second time, and intentionally counted twice. Similarly, in count 4, there was also unauthorized and unsolicited involvement by the elections group that were tasked by and through CTCL grants who participated in the hands-on and intimate facilitation of every facet of the 2020 election. So some outside party comes in, CTCL, they conduct and influence the recount, the Senate runoff, and the hand count. Incredible. So she provided a memorandum of understanding that was not signed by the Fulton County Board of Elections, the only entity that has the authority to conduct these things, and the board was never informed and never voted to authorize the elections group to access the voting systems, the equipment, or the data. And Tina Peters is in jail for something very similar to this. Now, second, Ms. McGowan and the Secretary of State investigators presented their report to the State Election Board back on May 7th, 2024. And the complainants, despite several requests, were not even allowed to speak. The SEB voted to resolve the complaint with a letter of reprimand contingent upon the parties agreeing to an election monitoring team for 2024. And the email was confirmed here below. Hi, Kevin. This is Alexandra Harden from the Secretary of State's office. Hi, Kevin. We have not issued the letter yet since the letter was contingent on them selecting an agreeable monitor before July. If they secure a monitor before July, we will issue the letter. If they fail to secure a monitor, we will refer the case to the AG's office. He continues, saying, again, the May 7th decision to resolve the complaint with a letter of reprimand was contingent upon all parties agreeing, and they sent a letter that continued. It said, here, as a preliminary matter, there is nothing within the authority of the board under the various code which allows the board to reverse or modify a final decision of the board. And the advice was all hinging upon a final decision. And there was no need to reconsider these various motions. And so the AG's office responded to that and said there was no legal authority to reopen the case and conduct any further investigation. And so she knew that on August, that the state election board members passed a motion to continue the investigation of this, but failed to disclose that. So the election board said, we are going to continue this. She says they didn't. Another lie, and then goes up into DC and testifies accordingly to strip other lawyers of their licenses for daring to investigate them. Here's the transcript from the meeting. Dr. Johnson said, I move that we refer the case to the AG with the instruction to immediately investigate the outside investigators with the 3 items of missing ballot images, duplicated recount votes, and missing documents. I also move that the AG seek advice of conflicts of counsel to determine who should represent the board in investigating the matter. The investigation continued, but she falsely stated that the AG said that the board had no authority to reopen the case. Not true. They did. She said it was adjudicated. It wasn't. It wasn't closed or decided. So she just made it up. And it continues on with more evidence to show that they do actually have the duty to investigate these things. That's why the board exists in the first place. So the board wanted the investigations to continue. Now they refused to do that, but she went and explained that they actually were not continuing with their investigation. Many statements about this, about how far they wanted this investigation to go, and it's all documented brilliantly. Then we move to count 4. They say, Ms. McGowan, Brad Raffensberger's lawyer, his main lawyer, authenticated the false hand count and the audit results that she knew to be false, which were then entered into evidence. McGowan failed to disclose the results of the hand count and the audit posted on Brad Raffensberger's website. The same results that she validated and were entered into evidence for the DC bar trial, while under oath submitted it, they do contain and include material errors. In fact, in those recount votes, those audit votes, there were 6,600 false votes. But she willfully entered a document into evidence as true and correct that she knew to be false and a material misrepresentation of the facts. First, McGowan claims that the Fulton County errors that were documented in another complaint did not affect the outcome of the election, which is a stupid phrase we heard over and over. The contest for the president of the United States did not stop at the county line. Okay, so Fulton County with 6,600 errors is just one county. We can use the same mathematical basis as the risk limiting audit to extrapolate this. There were approximately 148,000 absentee ballots that were cast in Fulton County. Out of only those in Fulton, 6,600 false ballots were found that do not exist or had a 4.52% that were in error. Now, of those, Trump got 1,000 false votes that do not exist, which is 15%, and Biden got 5,600 votes, or 83% of the made-up votes. Other candidates got 52 false votes. Shocking numbers. Weird. 83 to 15. All in favor of Biden. All made-up votes. A total of 1.3 million absentee ballots were cast throughout the state of Georgia. So if you just extrapolate that, if Brad and Charlene and the rest of the fraudsters keep that same pattern and that same percentage and spread that around the rest of Georgia, there were a total of 1.3 million absentee ballots cast in 2020. Now, just do the math. Using the same percentage, 4.5% of the false ballots, if you extrapolate that, 1.3 million times 4% equals 59,000 false ballots and votes, if you do the math, as they've done. So if you use that same ratio of distribution of false ballots and votes that were confirmed in Fulton County, what you have, candidate Biden gets an extra 49,000 votes. He gets 83% of the 59,000. Trump gets 9,000. So if you subtract the false votes from the state totals, that's the whole election. It is determinative, and the wrong candidate took office. Thank you, Kevin. So their investigation provided no evidence nor excuse to have us believe that the errors found in Fulton were isolated to Fulton or that they wouldn't be consistent in other counties. McGowan says it didn't change the outcome, but the math says otherwise. There's a possibility that it did, and she didn't even promote that possibility. Instead, she just said these lawyers deserve to be destroyed because they're making stuff up and arguing about conspiracy theories. It's completely plausible. McGowan misrepresents the 36 errors that were also discovered in the hand count. They were verified and the errors were reproduced by Brian Kemp's office. The governor released a report detailing each of the errors, along with a letter formally referring the matter to the SEB. The governor said, "The 36 inconsistencies noted by Mr. Rossi are factual in nature. They pose no underlying theories outside of the reported data. We don't have to go into like Venezuela or something. And they could not be explained by my office, the governor's office, after a thorough review. The purpose of this letter is to convey those inconsistencies to the board and to ask for them to be explained or corrected." And they also said, "The data that exists in public view on Brad Raffensberger's website of the RLA report does not inspire confidence. It is sloppy, inconsistent, and presents questions about what processes are used by Fulton to arrive at their result," because they're just made up. The governor then recommended that the board direct investigators to review Mr. Rossi's findings, just as the governor's office has, and order corrective action to address these errors. Now, Ms. McGowan acknowledged the errors in Fulton County. She even admitted this in a transcript back in 24. Said Fulton had some data entry errors as part of a risk limiting audit. It's always a data entry error or an administrative error. No intentionality at all. Just some idiots who were running the machines. Meaning that when they were taking the tally sheets that the people that were doing the audit completed and then entering it into the secretary's system, they made some data entry errors. Yeah, it's always just an innocent, oops, I accidentally added an extra zero. Or in Cheerfulness McCormick's case, a couple of zeros, and she got $5 million. In this case, they got the presidency. And it was that they made data entry errors when they were reporting the results to Brad's office. Now, she says that, yeah, just errors, but that's not true, says Kevin Monla. For the hand count audit, workers would take a batch of ballots and then sort them into stacks by the corresponding vote. Trump stack here, Biden stack here, Jorgensen stack here. The number of ballots for each candidate were counted and the totals were written on the batch tally sheet, right? This is the handwritten document. After all the ballots were counted, the totals on the batch tally sheets were then entered into software. It's called Arlo. That was controlled by Brad Raffensberger. Calls it the state system. One may wonder why counties didn't simply use a calculator, and it's because the secretary produced the hand count audit and the results, not the counties. Now, while McGowan claims that the problems were just data entry errors, her contention is at odds with the fact that in almost every instance, it was the batch tally sheets that did not represent the votes of the corresponding ballots. The batch tally sheets were wrong. The tally sheets were wrong, not the data entry. For example, the following is the batch tally sheet for absentee scanner 2, batch 22. Looks just like this. So somebody comes in here and absentee scanner 2, batch 22, Fulton, batch name, SC number 2, batch type, absentee. You see the stack totals and don't see much on there. Number for Trump, I don't know what's there. Number for Biden, looks like scribbles. Joe, others, blank. Here he explains The election workers who counted batch 22 recorded that it included 200 ballots, and for every ballot was a vote for candidate Joe. The totals entered and included in the Secretary of State's website also shows 200 votes for Joe, as you see right here. Gives us the spreadsheet. So after reviewing the corresponding ballot images, Mr. Rossi, the governor's office, and the undersigned found that there were not 200 ballots in batch 22. There were only 100. Oh! And of the 100, Joe Biden got 85 votes, Trump got 12, and other candidates got 3. So this is an inconsistency. Weird. So the audit, they explain inconsistency number 5, the batch entry row 19153 is this batch. We just saw the document. It reports 200 votes for Joe Biden. The ballot images corresponding to batch 22 do not reflect a unanimous vote. So the person who's counting them and organizing them into stacks is counting 200 for Joe. But the images, many of which were deleted, don't show that. Here's the audit report for that one machine. Rossi goes through, he counts it again. It's 85, 12, and 3. And then the internal count shows even different numbers. So Jorgensen loses a vote. Now, the ballot images, he explains, do not reflect a unanimous vote count. It's a major inconsistency. For inconsistency number 5, Biden got 115 additional false votes that simply do not exist. And Trump was shorted 12 votes that do exist. Weird. The vote totals documented on the batch tally sheet do not reflect the corresponding ballots at all. So it's not a data entry error. Okay. Somebody is counting those and chronicling them in favor of Joe. The false results shown on the batch tally sheet match the same false results in row 19153 in the hand count. So this was not a data entry. Okay, there are a total of 8 batch entries included in the results where Trump erroneously gets 0 votes, and almost all supported with a batch tally sheet. Like that shown above, errors with a batch tally sheet that don't match the ballots are not data entry errors. This raises a question of who fabricated fraudulent batch tally sheets, and why doesn't Charlene and the AG want to find out? So as a result of the 36 errors documented in the governor's report, a total of 6,600 false ballots that do not exist were added to the total ballots cast column. If you remove the false ballots from the total, because they're fake, Fulton County's corrected total ballots cast for the hand count audit is actually 521,000, which is 7,400 ballots less than certified for the November certified total of 528. Lots of numbers. Of these, Trump got 1,000 false votes. Biden received 5,600 false votes after correcting for the errors, including from only the absentee ballots of one county. The hand count audit results yield a margin of victory that is 4,900 less than the November 3rd results, and 3,900 votes less than the results of the recount. 11,779 was the total margin of victory for the entire state. Tiny. A review of only 3% of the ballots yielded errors that falsely inflated the margin of victory by 1/3. The 36 errors mysteriously added a sufficient number of ballots and votes to substantiate the results, but falsely. Just as a hand count and audit was used as a metric to corroborate the 11-3 results, after being corrected, it now discredits those results. So like the governor, the state election board, the AG, Ms. McGowan acknowledged that these errors were in fact made. No matter if you believe they were caused by a mistake or maladministration or intention, thousands of false ballots and votes were in fact added to the official results. The errors and the official results of the hand count audit have never been corrected. They have never been explained. And those responsible for actually manipulating those votes have never been held accountable. So the audit from the hand count also does not confirm nor validate the results of the first count. In fact, it firmly and substantially calls the results into question. Of course, this has been confirmed by every objective review, by any honest observer who's taken the time to do the math. The following is from a declaration of this guy, Professor Duncan Bell. Well, as filed in Curling, he said, given the level of tabulation discrepancies in Fulton in 2020, the hand count audit must be considered a failure. and a failure that should have been immediately triggering a serious analysis and mitigation of voting system deficiencies to ensure that future elections permit voters to actually cast an accountable vote. All just a giant sham, all just a fake show. No, we did a hand count. We did multiple hand counts. So they can come back in the media and say that. The declaration of another Berkeley professor, a highly respected election integrity expert and the inventor of the audit, is named Dr. Philip Stark. He describes his review of the 2020 election records. He said, Fulton County's chaotic, unaccountable curation and processing of cast ballots, cast BMD printouts, the machine printouts, and electronic records make a true risk-limiting audit impossible. You can't audit it. It's unreasonable for voters to trust that their votes were counted at all, much less counted correctly. Voters have good reason to believe that some votes counted more than others. Some votes were included twice, some votes included thrice. There is no way to know how many votes were omitted from the tabulation without access to the physical ballots, which the FBI now has, and the BMD printout and the evidence of chain of custody is intact. From the records produced so far, it is impossible to determine whether malware, bugs, misconfiguration, or malfeasance disenfranchised the voters or altered the election results. Which is kind of the point. It's one big mysterious black box. Nobody can peer inside. It's the election. It is what it is. You got to take it. So then McGowan falsely claims that they thoroughly investigated all of this during testimony from Mr. Byrne. And when you saw Mr. Rossi's complaint, did you have any assessment that this was a significant complaint? McGowan, Charlene says, well, I think you're conflating two things here. Mr. Rossi's original complaint was fully investigated by Brad Raffensberger. These findings were presented to the SEB. The board referred the case to the AG. That case was resolved via a consent order where Fulton County agreed to relief. That consent order was once again approved by the SEB. Now, Monla says, the record is very clear that Mr. Rossi's complaint is verified and referred to the SEB was not fully investigated. The secretary's investigators presented the results of their investigation back over to the board. Immediately before the board voted to refer the case to the AG, Dr. Johnson on the board and former investigator for the secretary's office, Mr. Zagarin, had the following exchange. Dr. Johnson on the state election board says, okay, Zagarin, so I have a question. How much off were these numbers when you looked at all of this again? He says, well, I just looked at these that were sent in the complaint. So you didn't look at all. Like I said a few times, I would find others that I would stumble across it, but I didn't pull those into this. But I didn't go back through to take out the ones that were in there thrice and try to figure out exactly what the number was. But I could tell what the issue was. I could that, like I said, 97 wasn't in there twice. It was 97 and 47. Then the ones that were in there twice, I didn't sit there and write out the specific number. I didn't go that far with this. So in other words, he didn't look into it at all from Brad's office. Great. So very clear indeed. Yeah, he says he didn't go back and look at it. Suffice it to say that her characterization that this has been fully investigated is not even remotely accurate. Somebody on her team says he didn't go far with this at all. McGowan further states that the case was referred to the AG's office for further action. Of course, none of that true. Saying, Byrne, okay, McGowan, so the investigation, did that result in legal allegations or what? She says, McGowan, the finding of the investigation was that Fulton had not fully followed all of the rules Fulton had some data entry errors, as part of the risk limiting audit. Meaning that when they were taking the tally sheets that the people that were doing the audit completed and then entering it into the system, that they made some data entry errors. It was a minor finding, and the secretary and the SEB basically resolved the case with the reprimand. A minor finding, question? It was. The state election board resolved the case with a reprimand. And then Fulton agreed to implement a more detailed procedure for conducting the results of the audit. It was errors in the way that the results were reported to the secretary's office. That's all. Nevertheless, despite the governor's directive to actually investigate it, the disposition of the case did not result in, nor require the errors and the official results of the hand count audit is posted on the Secretary's website to actually be corrected. If given the opportunity, objections and concerns that the results hadn't been corrected certainly would have been raised. However, the terms of the agreement were not even disclosed. In fact, the actual document was not provided to the members of the board at the time it came up for a vote. Johnston on the SEB voted against adopting an agreement she had never seen or read. 3 other members of the board, all attorneys, did blindly vote to accept it for some reason. During her testimony, McGowan was asked about an email that she wrote to the state election board chairman, retired Judge Duffy. And it came up. Byrne says, okay, so in July of 23, when you were looking for the Secretary of State's office, you sent Duffy an email. You said, I understand you have asked Sarah to open up a new case on Rossi's complaint against the Secretary's office about the posting of the RLA results, the audit results. Well, my email to Duffy, she responds, was Mr. Rossi insisting that the SEB investigate the Secretary of State and his involvement in posting the results. Duffy then requested a case to be opened in a separate complaint. And the complaint wanted the correction of the results so that the false results could not be used to fraudulently substantiate the results of 2020. She entered those false results into evidence knowing that they were false. So then she failed to disclose that the proven false results of the hand count that were posted on the website that they refused to correct, the same results she entered into evidence during the bar trial, okay, she uses this evidence that she knows to be false, were just errors of 6695 false votes. And so therefore, Ms. McGowan knowingly verified those results that she knew to be false without any disclaimer as she's presenting it as evidence against these lawyers. Mr. Horrell, Ms. McGowan, do you recognize this document? We can blow it up on the screen if you want. Oh, yeah, that appears to be a printout of the press release announcing the results of the audit. And it looks like it links to the files that were available on the website and are actually still available on the website that has detail of the results. So the prospect that the hand count audit results could be manipulated by one person entering data unchecked is an admission in and of itself. The assertion establishes that there are no checks and balances. There are no reconciliation processes happening. There's no accounting for even the audit. And perhaps it's because it was not an audit at all. It was just a giant show. Here, look, we're checking, you conspiracy theorists, get off our back. So it's completely inconsistent. You can go check it out on the website right there. So she just introduced evidence from the outcome of the election that she knew was not accurate because it had been litigated many times over, had gone up to the board, left the board, and they didn't change the numbers. They just left them up there. So then in count 5, McGowan refused to provide the SEB with evidence that was used to dismiss one of the allegations. Here's some testimony. Mr. Horrell says, Ms. McGowan, what is this document? She says, well, that appears to be a more detailed report of the results of the risk limiting audit for 2020. Is this report one of the reports that was accessible via the link in the press release that we just saw? I believe so, yes. Emily, can you take that down, Mr. Chair? I would move to it. I would move in Exhibit 111. Now that Exhibit 11, the ballot images were cited as Exhibit 11 in the investigator's report, but McGowan refused to provide Exhibit 11 unless the SEB agreed that the case was closed. They wrote, Fulton County's 2020 election results as of the recount deadline, or a few minutes before midnight, totaled 511,000 ballots cast. So they do the audit. They give you 511,000 total. That is significantly less than the reported results from the real election. 528,000 was the original number. 17,000 ballots less in the recount. Where did those 17,000 ballots go? Then the secretary directed Fulton County to, quote, reconcile. So, you better go find those. Midnight, then 24 hours later, they find them. The official certified results then went back up to 527,000 ballots. So election night, it's 528,000. Recount 511,000. Oops, we're missing 17,000. Go find them. They do. They come back the next day, 24 hours later. Oh, we just forgot to scan that box over there. Now the numbers go back up. Included in that total are 17,800 ballot results without corresponding ballot images. It's important to note that the recount shortfall described above and the number of the ballot results without images are too close to be ignored and raise serious questions. The complaint stated, Fulton County provided a thumb drive with 518,000 ballot images identified as Exhibit 11. The implication, albeit false, was that nearly half of the missing ballot images had been found. None of the missing ballot images were found, and proper access to this would establish that fact if you could actually look at it. The SEB is the only agency that can do that, and the secretary is supposed to investigate this. They have a duty to investigate these things. And of course they didn't. And she then made it a condition. I will give you evidence only if you close the case and stop investigating it, burying the truth. Then we get count 6. Says she also falsely claimed that the electronic poll pads were not connected to the internet. And they were. When asked if the electronic poll pads were connected to the internet in any way, McGowan said, no. Here's how it went down. Were the poll pads for the November 2020 election connected to the internet in any way? No. Oh, that is false. The poll pads and the laptops used to process the in-person check-ins and the ballot applications were in fact connected to the internet. A common observation was that poll workers were watching Netflix on the poll pads. The no ink poll pads and the ePoll software platform were a part of Dominion's Master Solutions Agreement. In response to the state of Georgia's request for information, they explained, ePulse is an all-inclusive election management suite designed to give administrators real-time access to monitor their election. All poll pads connect to the central hub where voters check in. It's all securely transferred via Wi-Fi or cell. This tool allows for administrators to oversee the operations of the precincts and the poll pads, including battery life and check-in times and more. So, of course, they all were connected. They established this in prior cases called Curling versus Raffensberger. They noted, even Judge Totenberg wrote this in his order. He said there was evidence of potential vulnerabilities in the poll pads, and since poll pads are connected to the internet, everyone knows they're connected to the internet. So she should have known that they were in fact connected to the internet because she represents Brad Raffensberger. She was representing him in that same lawsuit. Mobile data plans were also purchased for each polling location. Here's an excerpt of it right here. Verizon data plan, Cradle Point router, billed annually with SIM cards, $350 plus a $15 activation. Verizon loves to hit you with those things. So they knew this was billed. Look to who this went to. Georgia Secretary of State. There you go. So she knew they were connected, lied about it. They also purchased mobile hotspots connected to each polling location as a backup. Here you go. Another 100 hotspots, all picked up. So with all of these lies, she testified different from what the truth was. She's a lawyer. She's the general counsel for the Secretary of State. She is being held to high ethical and professional standards. She's an official representative for the state, and she intentionally, knowingly, and repeatedly failed to uphold that responsibility. And Ms. McGowan and her actions prevented review, serious redress of grievances. She obstructed election officials from performing their duty. She concealed massive violations of state and federal law, knowingly and willfully made false statements of facts, not only to a tribunal, but to a bar disciplinary board to go attack other lawyers. Exceptionally egregious is that the secretary's general counsel weaponized the weight of her office. Okay, she came in. I'm the lawyer for the secretary. I know how things work. These other lawyers who are making these complaints up and making these claims like it's being connected to the internet and all this, they're lying. They're conspiracy theorists. They're undermining their ethical duties. They're not providing a straightforward argument. And so they should lose their license, their livelihood, and be destroyed from ever doing this again. Why? Because they're accurate. They're actually onto something. They're sniffing out the truth. She wielded her testimony against 3 lawyers. If that was not her intent, then it seems that her false statements were intended to be exculpatory, and we can use that to establish consciousness of guilt. So this appears to have violated federal and state law, in addition to the rules of professional conduct, all listed here. Knowing and willful false statements of material fact, false statements about mandatory requirements to preserve ballot images. She knows that they had to. When asked about the poll pads, no. Being connected to the internet, she says no. When asked about pending proceedings being closed, she said it was closed. It wasn't. Failed to correct her testimony. Validated hand counts and audits that she knew to be false, which were then entered into evidence to say these other lawyers are crazy. She repeated and made false statements, engaged in multiple acts of deceit and intentional misrepresentation, and her false testimony, along with other obstruction, show a pattern, practice, and willingness to engage in conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. Also made false statements to the state election board, also to the state disciplinary board. None of it's been corrected, and this is damaging to the practice of law. And so we now request disciplinary action for her. They try to take out all of the other lawyers like John Eastman and many others who dare to challenge them. So given the gravity of this and the gravity and seriousness of her misconduct, it undermines the profession. There's a concerted effort to punish lawyers, even prosecute them, even put them in jail, who have purportedly made unsubstantiated allegations of wrongdoing. So if they can be prosecuted, this needs to be balanced. She acted unlawfully, unethically. She concealed, denied, and made material violations. And when she does this, this resulting sanction should be the most severe. She is violating her office, and her actions demonstrate a clear disregard for her position, for her ethical duties. She irreversibly undermined public trust, and her conduct poses an immediate threat to public interest. So therefore, we ask that she be disbarred and prohibited from ever again practicing law in the state of Georgia. Respectfully submitted by Kevin Monla. Shout out to Kevin Monla. He submitted this, it looks like, back in 2025, Rochelle Kabarak and Melissa White all signing off on this in a brilliant filing that chronicles very explicitly what a liar, in my opinion, this woman is. And I think that opinion is substantiated by a lot of fact. Now, he released that to us today, April 16th, yesterday. And he's now tagging everybody about this and saying, hey, pretty clear evidence of lies, obstruction, and malfeasance coming from the main lawyer for Brad Raffensberger. And maybe it's worth looking into. Harmeet Dillon, FBI Atlanta, DOJ, Eagle Ed Martin, Judge Janine, going into testimony in a DC bar trial and presenting false evidence against other lawyers to try to steal their livelihood away from them, when she should be held to a much higher standard. And so this is going to continue on. We appreciate Kevin Monla. The guy's a hero. And of course, we're going to repost this at the top of our timeline so you can give him a follow. And we're happy to see this continue to play out. Now, a lot of this could be fixed with fair elections that are operated with integrity. One person who wants to see more of that is Rand Paul. He said, I am a proud co-sponsor of the SAVE Act, showing your ID to vote so you can make sure that the ballot is matching with one person, not just made up fake ballots, thousands of ballots shoved into the Georgia system without any correction at all. Could be minimized if it was one person, one vote. The SAVE Act would help accomplish that. Here's what Rand Paul had to say about this. It should be the minimum requirement. It should be much more, but the minimum is ID. Here's Rand.
We get asked about this all the time. The SAVE Act. What's going to happen? What should happen? Is anything going to progress in any way there in terms of a resolution? We're talking with Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky.
I'm a co-sponsor of it. I think it should be a minimum to vote in our country that you have to present an ID. Another problem we have besides the ID is also this idea of voting by mail. In our state, we went ahead and got rid of voting by mail for the most part. 97% of Kentuckians vote in person. We still have about 5 Republican or battleground states that haven't done it. So while I'm for a national ID to be shown for voting in national elections, I think we should also have a push, because we may not get enough votes to pass it in the Senate. We should also be pushing at the state level. So Utah, Arizona, Alaska, Iowa, West Virginia, all Republican-leaning states, maybe except for Arizona, still don't have sufficient voter ID laws. And they also mail ballots to everyone and keep mailing them and mailing them and mailing them and soliciting voters who normally don't have the energy to get off their couch. And so I think we need to keep addressing it national level. If we're not successful there, I think the next step is to go to the 5 remaining Republican or battleground states, and let's change the laws in those states to have better voter ID laws.
Would be nice to see that. And we know why many states don't want to do that, because the grift is in the gray area. As long as it's one big mysterious operation and there's opportunities for administrative errors or data entry problems, oops, and no one looks into it, because the people who are enabling those fraudulent activities are the ones who continue to maintain power and then promote the people who are supposed to be investigating it who don't investigate it, then the grift continues. And that's the whole design of the system, which is why we need the SAVE Act to be passed. And so we're happy to see some accountability making its way through the system. The people who did the cover-ups need to be held accountable for their crimes, and Charlene McGowan is at the top of that list. So we're going to keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thank you for joining and subscribing as we do. All right, now, we're not done yet. We got another update coming out of Arizona, and this is a big one. And we're happy to check this one out too. Major Arizona election win. We see that Jake Hoffman, one of the people who was targeted for daring to challenge the 2020 election, is celebrating this. He says, AZ election integrity update. Massive defeat for the corrupt Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and Tom Galvin. The court ruled in favor of Justin Heap on every single issue in the case. Thank you for fighting for honest, secure, and lawful elections, Recorder Justin Heap. And if you missed Jake Hoffman, he has been around a while. Founder of the Arizona Freedom Caucus, RNC member for Arizona, persecuted Trump elector, and Arizona senator, state senator. Now saying that this is a tremendous victory. And we've got the ruling that just dropped this week. You see, it's Justin Heap versus Thomas Galvin. This has been a battle between the incoming county recorder, Justin Heap, who took over the office from Stephen Richer. On Stephen Richer's way out, he shackled the new county recorder's office. And in Arizona, we bifurcate some of the election rules and duties. So the Board of Supervisors does a bunch of stuff, and the county recorder does a bunch of stuff. Stephen Richer, who, as we know, got glazed by Norm Eisen on his website, States United Democracy Center, or whatever it's called, is part of that entire entourage. Over at the Cato Institute, anti-Trump organizations, they have been working hard to make sure that he doesn't ever get power ever again. Of course, they failed. And so when he left, he entered into an agreement with the Board of Supervisors and said, I'm giving you all of my responsibilities so that the incoming recorder can't read our emails, can't check what we did during the prior elections. Justin Heap, the new recorder, sued and said, those are mine. Those are my statutory obligations. I have a responsibility to make sure that I'm following the law. And so he sued to get those powers back. And this decision just came down from the Honorable Scott Blaney out of the Superior Court of Arizona, submitted and filed today, fresh out of the oven. And you can see the judge walks us through just how scandalous this whole thing was. He says, before us is Justin Heap's verified complaint for a special action, saying we need to hear this immediately, essentially, quickly. The parties' respective motions for judgment and related briefing and a bunch of the amicus curiae briefings said some time ago in a joint stipulation filed by the parties back in August last year, they stipulated to briefing schedules and we got a bunch of evidence and now I've considered it. Here's what we find. He writes, Justin Heap is the current Maricopa County recorder. He was elected November 4, 24. The defendants, Galvin Stewart, Kate Brophy McGee, Debbie Lesko, and Steve Gallardo, all are on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. The 15 Arizona counties are responsible for managing and implementing most facets of Arizona's complex elections infrastructure. It's so complicated. The legislature has assigned some responsibilities like voter registration, mail-in voting, voting processes for militaries and overseas voters to the county recorders, which in this case is Maricopa County Recorder, the biggest county in Arizona, Justin Heap. Other aspects of election administration, like overseeing the operation of polling locations on election day, tabulation and certification of election results, all go to the Board of Supervisors. So we split it up. IT operations were historically housed in the recorder's office. But after Recorder Heap secured his party's nomination for recorder, and prior to Recorder Heap actually assuming the responsibilities of his new office, the outgoing recorder, who Heap had just defeated in a primary election, Stephen Richer, that guy who is BFFs with Norm Eisen, according to Norm's websites, entered into a shared services agreement with the board that transferred control over the recorder's IT systems to certain personnel on the board. So Justin Heap comes in and says, I'm going to reform all of this. He is going to fix the problems. Then Stephen Richer just starts shoveling out responsibilities so that Justin doesn't have these powers anymore. Recorder Heap then took office January 25. Upon taking office, he terminated the shared services agreement. He says, that's not bound by that at all. It's all canceled. Asserting its unenforceability, it's a violation of the law. So he made efforts to negotiate a new agreement, including offering mediation on June 5th. However, the parties couldn't come to a resolution because the board wanted those powers continuing to be under their purview. Now, as stated above, prior to him taking office, the board transferred the recorder's entire IT staff to its own ETI department. The board. Okay, so the Board of Supervisors steals it all. They take the county's power and give it back over to themselves. The fiscal year adopted budget showed a shared services adjustment of $4.5 million, representing the salaries of all the people who got stripped out of Justin's office. Then Sam Stone, the recorder's chief of staff, testified that returning these employees back over to the recorder would not require the county to spend any money. All you have to do is just shift it back over. Brian Colby, also the CIO, testified that the board seized control of the servers, the databases, and the websites that belong to the county recorder. This arrangement is unique among the county's elected officers. Various other county managers, Zach and Colby, they testified that other elected officials in the county have their own IT departments that report to the elected officer, not back to the board. The board's decision to fund separate ID departments for every elected county officer while stripping the recorder of his own strongly suggests that an independent IT department is a necessary expense, and the refusal to allow Justin the same resources appears not to be motivated by a legitimate government purpose, but is actually depriving him of the tools and the access to the files that he needs to perform his statutory duties. Remember, Harmeet Dillon sent some letters in. I'd like your emails. Preserve all your records. I want to know what you did. Justin says, I don't have them. They're not in my office. They got stripped away from me. We read that yesterday. The recorder says, Arizona law says these are my powers and we don't have any money. We don't have any authority to do this now because Richer handed it off. Now, since the transfer, the recorder's office has been entirely dependent on the county IT. Said that 76 of 147 IT tickets are still unsolved and that the recorder's requests are all being deprioritized. So Justin has no power to even function. There's a massive backlog, all sorts of problems, VPN outages, website outages lasting 6 hours, reduction in system outages, and more. In fact, in October, somebody misapplied a Cisco security patch, and that prevented the recorder from remotely accessing the systems to do their signature clipping. Oh, a mission critical task during the Uokava voting and just before the early ballots were sent. So now the county recorder can't even check the signatures because he's been stripped of it. ETI implemented the patch, didn't tell the recorder about it. Colby credibly testified that if the recorder controlled the systems, the patch could have been scheduled after 10 p.m., eliminating any disruption. So the board and the refusal to give them back the power impedes his ability to do the basic stuff that is necessary to the functioning of the office. Then on November 12th, the recorder's public website went offline for 6 hours. The outage was discovered by the board, but the recorder, and not by the board, but by the recorder. Colby once again said that the board had not deployed standard URL monitoring tools. And they're trying to make Justin look like an idiot, like he's failing as his job as a county recorder. They also had automated annual backup that filled the disk housing and all sorts of other, complicated technical IT stuff that's all failing because the board stripped him from monitoring it. When the recorder wanted to hire a new manager, a position whose salary would be paid by the funds in his budget, Jennifer Pokorski directly intervened and blocked the job posting. Sent an email citing active litigation. I'm not going to allow you to post this position until litigation is finalized and Justin is completely neutered. So the board steals it. Then there was a sorting machine problem. Janine Petty, the recorder's senior director of voting registration, said that approximately 25,000 provisional ballots must be processed each general election. The current process requires each ballot to be individually hand scanned using a slow process. In 24, the law was amended to allow voters to correct their registration and become full ballot voters if they provide proof of citizenship. She said that due to the condensed time frame and manual scanning, some voters who timely cured their ballots were nonetheless not upgraded to full ballot status because there was no time. She said that between 100 and 100 voters per election are disenfranchised as a result. Their ballots are counted as federal only when they should have gotten a full ballot. The Agilis machine that processes about 18,000 envelopes per hour, meaning the entire inventory, could be rescanned in 90 minutes. Enabling a timely identification and upgrade. Stone testified that the recorder submitted a formal request for the machine with a detailed justification for it prepared by this guy, Valenzuela, but the board denied the request. Amazing. Citing recurring licensing costs and lack of space. Now, the court also finds that the website, the IT staff, the servers, they were all seized by the board and they were previously under the control of the recorder. And the recorder needs that. The legislature appropriated $4.1 million to the county recorder, and the board, they wrote in the law, shall not reduce the funding. But that's exactly what they did. None of the money has been spent. The board has denied the recorder the ability to use these funds. They could easily just check everything. Separately, the recorder has sought $1 million in HAVA money from a federal grant for this. The board's IT director also submitted a request seeking to spend these funds to hire staff. But the recorder objected because these funds belong to the recorder's office and they report to him. So the board based its denial of the request on another law and HAVA funds saying you can't have them. So the recorder, Justin Heap, has repeatedly said he wants to work with the board. And so those are the background facts. Judge says, here's what I find. This court has jurisdiction. I can make a decision here on this case as to both sides of this conflict. The recorder is responsible for overseeing a bunch of things under Arizona law, all cited here. The board is responsible for other things: precinct boundaries, election day voting locations, preparing the ballots, studying polling locations, and more under these provisions of the law. The board is also responsible for approving certain appropriations, making contracts, and more. The court recognizes that this is not a super board. And the court is, I'm not a super board. I'm not substituting my judgment. I'm just trying to enforce the law as written. And here, Arizona law says that necessary expenses that are incurred by the county recorders, some are obligated to be paid. The county recorder is an enumerated officer, and he needs the money under the law to actually do his job. It's not contingent, that money, based on the existence of an intergovernmental agreement that Stephen Richer enabled with the board. This duty exists independently and cannot be abrogated by a voluntary service agreement between the parties. So the board now may not use its authority to usurp the functions of the recorder. Nice win. Although recognizing the board's authority to fund the recorder's reasonable expenses, the court finds the board's denial of these requests for personal expenditures was not arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretion. The board's witnesses said that this has been consistent. Now, they talk about more necessary expenses, and under ARS, county officers enumerated under the law may appoint people to help them with their offices. The board's transfer of all of these databases, software, websites, and other things without the recorder's consent divests the recorder of the ability to follow his statutory duties. And it is an unlawful usurpation of the recorder's statutory authority. And they're not allowed to do that. They concluded in other cases that this was problematic. If the board decides not to return these things, then the board is obligated to fund him to go hire his IT staff, secure office and warehouse space, and develop his own databases. So either give it back or don't, but you're paying for it if you don't. So the recorder and other officers in charge delegates authority to the recorder unless he consents to the delegation of another officer, saying County Board of Supervisors and county recorders are constitutional officers. Each has to do their jobs. There are 4 distinct formulations on how this works. History confirms this interpretation, and the legislature has expanded this. Any interpretation that allows the board to unilaterally claim his duties violates multiple canons, violates the surplusage canons and other things as well. So the court therefore finds specifically that when an election statute imposes a duty or responsibility on either the recorders or the board, with the caveat that another officer in charge may accomplish this task, the legislature intended that the first instance that it be carried out by the officer specifically listed in the statute. And it continues. Says the legislature enactment of this bill, SB 1735, gave $4.1 million to the county recorder's office. This is legislation that is determining that he possesses an independent authority requiring independent funding. Again, if the board fails to give him back his staff, his servers, his databases, his software, and his websites, and the equipment that they've stolen from him, then the board is obligated under the law to fund it. You have to give him money so he can go hire his own people. This is irreparable harm because he has shown the board has acted unlawfully and exceeded its authority by seizing his personnel, seizing his systems and equipment, and refusing to return them. He doesn't need to satisfy another standard. And even if he were required to show irreparable harm, these are constitutional violations that are irreparable harm. He cannot adequately address these through other mechanisms. So the evidence at trial did establish that Justin Heap's inability to exercise meaningful control over his systems will cause concrete operational harms, including the inability to process ballots, resulting in voters being denied tabulation of the full ballots. And if we don't step in here, the court, and do something, we're going to have election problems. And public policy also favors this. The continuing disruption of the allocation of these duties threatens the integrity and lawful orderly conduct of future elections in Maricopa County. So therefore, it is now ordered, declaring that the recorder may subsequently withdraw his consent from Stephen Richards' hack scam settlement agreement. Also says the Board of Supervisors may withdraw their consent as well, saying the Board of Supervisors has a duty, non-discretionary, to fund all expenses of the county recorder under Arizona law. You must return custody of the staff, the servers, the databases, the software, and the websites that were originally in his custody until Stephen Richards siphoned it off, or fund the replacement of all of these items so that he can do his job. Also, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors are now enjoined from further exercising any election functions that have been delegated to the county recorder unless he consents otherwise. Beautiful. Now, while declaring the board has a non-discretionary duty to these things, the court takes no position on the specific expenditures. He wants the Agilis machine. They say no. Absent a clear showing that the board's funding decisions are arbitrary, the determination of the Agilis machine's necessity is an issue more appropriately addressed through good faith negotiations between all the sides. All other arguments are moot or unpersuasive. So now we direct the recorder to prepare and lodge a form of judgment and shall file any statement of taxable costs. And the Arizona Board of Supervisors blown out on this one. And it's a total scam. I mean, they stole the guy's power. Stephen Richard didn't like that he lost to him and didn't want him to go in there and look at all those emails, look at, make all the adjustments and undo the things that he did. So he comes in, changes a bunch of stuff, helps to create an environment that's more favorable to his preferred candidates. On his way out, divest the office of all the power after he loses. And then the next guy can't do anything about it. Now the judge just said, no, that's ridiculous. You lose. Justin Heap wins. Board of Supervisors blown out. And we're happy to see this. Very good news. Now, elsewhere in Arizona, we also saw that Ruben Gallego, the senator, may be facing some additional problems as he's been connected to Bang Bang Eric Swalwell, who made apparently some illegal bang bangs out there, currently under investigation in New York at least, and maybe other locations as well. Anna Paulina Luna was out saying she's got some information about the Arizona Senator Ruby, who may or may not have been in the bedroom in that one photo. We don't know. Telling CBS News' Major Garrett that her office has given Senate Majority Leader staff John Thune information about allegations that are sexual in nature. CBS News has reached out to Senator Gallego, but he's not talking about this too much at all. Here's Luna.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, it seems like the Senate has its own trash to take out. You, meaning Thune, need to look into the allegations against one of your senators. It's very disturbing. Who are we talking about?
We are talking about an Arizona senator that was very closely tied to Eric Swalwell, and I have since confirmed with Senator John Thune's chief of staff, as well as they're linking us to their ethics that they are investigating, and we are sending all appropriate information directly to them now.
That would be Ruben Gallego, correct?
Correct.
When you say in that X post, it's very disturbing, for my audience's benefit, can you define what disturbing means to you?
Well, without, I guess, getting too graphic, there is a woman that allegedly is coming forward with attorneys, wants to go on record about an incident that occurred between the two of them at the same time, and the event was sexual in nature, allegedly. But it's not just that. There's also apparently issues of campaign finance violations. Again, look, I am one member of Congress, but I'm not going to be like some of my colleagues that waited, forever and a day to bring this information forward. I think that if this is happening, that it needs to be dealt with. I'm definitely not in the Senate, but I think that Thune should probably take that seriously and look into it, especially given the nature of what's become apparent regarding Eric Swalwell.
Based on what you know, Congresswoman, does this sound to you, and you're not a prosecutor, neither am I, but does it sound to you that it's criminal in nature regarding Senator Gallego?
I think that if it involves people that were potentially trafficked, yes. Regarding the campaign finance violations, I think that that's cut and dry. But right now, I'm not investigating this. I'm simply presenting this information to the authorities that have the positions and power to do what they will with it. Part of the problem that we have in Washington currently is that a lot of this behavior was circulating publicly. People had heard about it, but they didn't present it to the appropriate authorities. And frankly, right now we have a slush fund that 3/4 of Congress voted to protect. We had to subpoena those records in House oversight, and we should be obtaining them next week. But again, that information belongs to the American people. If your taxpayer dollars to the tune of $18 million, which is I think the current number, are being used to cover sexual harassment, sexual assault settlements, that's not something that we should be paying for, and I definitely don't want to serve with these types of people. I understand, too, playing devil's advocate, that people can make false allegations, but given, again, the stuff that's come out with Eric Swalwell, given the stuff involving potentially escorts involved, et cetera, again, I sent this information as soon as I got it to the appropriate authorities.
And you mentioned the word trafficking. That carries a lot of weight in a lot of different ways, criminal and emotional. Do you believe sex trafficking is part of what this could be about?
I think any time that you are knowingly engaging in purchasing someone for sex, that is something that should be taken seriously. I've heard this now about a few members of Congress. One of them is under current investigation by House Ethics. I think that there's another one being opened up in the Senate. But yes, I would say that that's criminal nature. Actually, right now in the United States, according to the Trafficking in Persons report that the State Department typically puts out, we're one of the worst countries in the world for that. And again, we don't know anything about these individuals. I mean, are they doing it on their own accord? Are they being forced? Are they being coerced? Again, though, most people don't have these types of allegations. Most people don't have these types of rumors floating around about their offices. And the problem that we're seeing right now is that there are a few people up here that are coming up here and they're not serving their constituents. And it should not be the expectation, nor should it be asked of us by either party to cover up for this type of behavior. And so I do applaud journalists that are asking questions on this, because I don't want to serve with these people. I don't think that they should be in positions of power. And I definitely don't like what I've seen in regards to how they've treated women specifically. It's actually really gross when you hear about it.
Yeah, it is disgusting. And it's in our Congress. And apparently there's a whole system set up to deal with these claims. So we need some transparency on it. Anybody who is being accused of it certainly deserves a presumption of innocence, and they can defend themselves if the allegations come out, just like anybody else has to. Why does Congress get special privileges to bury the evidence and just pay them with our taxpayer dollars to make the whole thing go away? It's disgusting. I hope that there is a serious reckoning here, not only in Arizona, but in Congress as well. We want actual elections with non-perverted predators who are governing us. So big win in Arizona. We have good judgments coming out of our Superior Court. The actual duly elected Justin Heap now getting his power back. And apparently Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego going to have some more problems coming down the line. So we're going to keep our eye on this one and much more election news. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right. Beautiful friends, it's been a lovely stream. If you're just getting here, we had a burner that dropped about this woman, Charlene McGowan, the general counsel for Brad Raffensberger, seen here, who has been working on his team for a while, apparently rumored to get appointed to be a judge or something, also now hit with a major bar complaint released courtesy of Kevin Monla. And he filed this, it looks like some time ago. We're learning about it today, courtesy of this post, tagging a bunch of other people, Harmeet Dillon, Purdue, Eagle Ed Martin, and FBI, saying this woman probably committed some felonies in lying under oath in multiple proceedings, knowing that what she was saying was dishonest. He went through 6 counts of this, gave us a bunch of documents, and we keep learning just about how shockingly bad the entire scam in Georgia ultimately was and how everybody was involved in the cover up. Then Rand Paul was here saying we want the SAVE Act and much more, and we need it to pass at the federal level, but also at the state level would be good, because it's probably not going to pass at the federal level because our Congress is useless. Then we saw in Arizona, big victory in the battle between the Arizona and the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and the Maricopa County Recorder. Stephen Richard, Norm Eisen's BFF, delegated and divested the incoming county recorder of all sorts of power. Now that power is being returned. We're happy to see it. And Luna says Gallego is in big trouble. But now it's time to hear from you. Let's see what you say about all of this. I saw some great donos coming in. Thank you for sending these in, my friends. Happy Friday. Hopefully you're doing something fun this weekend. Enjoyable, relaxing, rejuvenating, and all the things. Hey, what's going on? We've got this person crushing people's heads like this, just crushed. Viva! What's up, Viva? Thanks for the raid. Shout out to our friends who joined us over from our friend Viva over on Rumble. We love Viva. Shout out to Viva. We appreciate him. Thank you, Viva. Hopefully you're doing well, my man. One old guy. When are these people going to trial for these cooked ballot cheating BS? Well, that's a good question. Yeah. Don't really have anything queued up on that. Of course, we want to keep our eye on all indictments and criminal complaints for the 2020 election fraudsters. Currently, there are 0 of those, though. But when they drop, hopefully soon, we're going to be here to cover it, one old guy. Also says 2020 is worse Then the hanging Chad BS from Florida. Remember that? Yeah, the Bush versus Gore. The solution were the voting machines BS and loosely regulated absentee ballots BS. All just BS, honed to elect mystery Babylonian demons, both Rhino and Democrat. Yeah, Joe Biden got 81 million votes. It was all just like an onslaught. They used COVID to change all the rules. And then based on the rule changes, we had a flood of ballots. Then when you go and validate the actual elections, the validations are all erroneously, errored out. The data input was not accurate. A giant scam, all just a giant show. Larry, what's up? Thank you, one old guy. Larry from Maryland. 200 votes reported, but only 85 actual is an error rate of 135%. The error rate is over 100%. Yeah, and she didn't update the data and didn't really report any of that during her testimony under oath, and used the fake reports to then go and essentially incriminate other people. It is shameful. No honor at all. No honor, no integrity, just playing the part to get promoted to a higher position within the party. It's sick. It's disgusting. Trying to wreck people's lives on this lie. Hey, King of Biltong is here. Did you know you can go to BiltongUSA.com? You can get premium biltong, baby. High protein, keto friendly, no additives, U.S. source beef, authentic South African flavor. And if you use code Robert, you'll save 10% off and get some juicy meats delivered to your house. One old guy. Miss Turda Ferguson McGowan, what is the order? Is it mendacity coming from you? Oh, yeah, that's Burt Reynolds, the guy that we called out yesterday. Not Burt Jones, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. He's not Burt Reynolds, but he's, also a handsome man. Hey, what's up, Rick D? Good to see you. Hey, Rob, remember the dumbest member of Congress bracket I posted? They finally posted the completed bracket. Oh my gosh. Is it Sex Freak Hirono wins? Wow, that's a good one. Champion Mazi Hirono. Wow. The dumbest of all the Congress people. That's a good one. She came from behind. She beat Bang Bang Swalwell out and then beat Jasmine Crockett to go into the finals and then beat Sri Thanadar, the guy with the eyebrows who can't even speak English, who impeaches Trump for everything. Wow. Yeah, she's a top contender, no doubt. She beat AOC. Sri beat AOC for the dumbest member. That's a good one. Yeah, Sri beats Hakeem. That makes sense. Shri's also like a top 10. I mean, he's in the top 5 for sure. So he's now number 2. I would say that's a good call. Hakeem beat whoever that person is. Hank Johnson, Mr. Guam Capsize, lost to Rashida Tlaib. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know. I think I might have gone the other way on that one. Mr. Guam Capsize versus Rashida Tlaib. AOC beat Chuck Schumer. Good call on that one. Bang Bang Swalwell beat Maxine Waters, which is interesting, which is good. Ted Lieu lost to Sex Freak Hirono. Jasmine Crockett beat Alex Padilla. Dan Goldman beat Chris Murphy. Amazing. Ruben, he got taken out by Alex Padilla. I don't know. I think Ruben now with the new news may have ascended even a little bit further. Jasmine's going to be out soon, so she's on her way out anyways. Pretty good list here. Maxine Waters beat Ilhan Omar. Interesting. Pramila lost to Eric Swalwell. Vindman lost to Crockett. That's a good call. I don't know. I think I would have put Goldman versus or Gallego versus Crockett, but I don't. It is what it is. The brackets just continue. So, yeah, pretty good bracket. I have to agree with it. I mean, I think Sex Freak Hirono, she's the senator who, during the Trump confirmation hearings, every single question is about, did you have sex this morning? Oh, yeah? Who'd you have sex with? Tell me about it. Was it good? And you're like, this is an open hearing. Mazi, what's wrong with you? Well, you didn't have sex with anybody. Was it illegal sex? No. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No. Okay. Well, Next person, same questions. You're like, what a freak show. All right, so she wins. Dumbest member of Congress. I think that's good. It's a good call. That makes sense to me. Thank you, Rick D, for that. Good stuff. Hey, Jim tells you. Jim, amazing. Hey, thank you again for the raids. You are awesome. Amazing. Glad you're enjoying those. We'll send them over your way today. And hopefully you have a great stream. So friends will send you over there. And make sure that we do that right now. I did it the other day as we exited the stream, if you're wondering if I did that, which we did. So happy to do that. And hopefully you're having a great time and great streams. Jim, keep up the great work, man. Stream. Love it. 8 months as a member, almost a full baby too. Happy to have you here. Thank you, James. Jim tells you. Hey, Tim Jake. Thank you, Tim, for bringing in new Membo friends. We had a great members only stream this morning. We got into some spicy topics, some good stuff happening. Valerie, what's up? Kel, good to see you. Azure Sky, what's up? CJ, Manifest Moon in the house, courtesy of Tim Jake. Tim, thank you for being a Membo and bringing in 5 new Membo friends. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning on the members only Saturday stream. Doan, it was Trump ballots that backed up the toilets at the State Farm Arena. It's true. Yeah, it's true. That's hilarious, Doan. The water main break was because they were flushing the Trump ballots. And then CNN comes out. Oh, wow. Oh, there's a water main break. We're going to have to stop the count. Weird. Plumber's in there. He's just pulling out ballot. Oh, gosh, another one. Oh, another one. Fannie Willis is in there just flushing all the toilets. Thank you, Doan. Hilarious. Rick D, here's an interesting chart. Most expensive affordable grocery store ever. U.S. grocery chains estimated all-in cost per square foot per new location. $3,000 a square foot. No, it's going to be great. You're going to go to Mom Donnie's Mart, and you're going to have to pick a number like at the DMV and wait for 4 hours. And you're going to get there, and they're going to say, we don't have it. Come back tomorrow. So that's going to be great. Whole Foods is $357. Everything else is under $1,000. He's going to be about $3,300 a square foot. Incredible. What a disaster that's going to be. Should be fun to watch. Crazy people out there in New York City. One old guy. In closing, Miss McGowan had a severe case of projectile vomitaceous, an IBSD case of mendacity. A lot of mendacity, lots of odors coming out of Georgia for sure. She poses a threat to public health and morality and life of our republic. Disbar and exercise Turd Ferguson McGowan from being a lawyer. Well, we'll see what the bar does. Hopefully they do that. And she should be ashamed of herself. Right? As a lawyer, you're supposed to be better than that. Most are not most. Most are amazing lawyers. Most are really good people who care about the industry, who care about the impact. They go to law school because they're idealistic. They want to change things, all good. We need a lot of that. But then you get these people who are just hacks and hatchets for their political party who will just do and say anything and violate all of their ethical sworn duties. It's really a shame. LZ. Hey, thank you, LZ. $7 for luck. A Friday tradition. Always prayers for everyone in Tornado Alley. I saw that. Yeah, prayers up for our friends in that region. Special blessings to the Gouveia family in their new home in DC. Welcome to the East Coast. And here's hoping you have smooth transitions to daylight savings time when the time comes. Yeah, I don't even know how it works. Really. Been an Arizona boy my whole life. We don't do that, but now I'm in DC, so I guess we have to do that. Thank you, LZ. Very nice to see you. Thank you for the prayers. Prayers over to you and your family. We appreciate you being here, and thank you for the Friday tradition. We love you. Hey, one old guy. The odor of mendacity came from high in the ranks of mystery Babylonian leader of the beast system. He is rising out to of the sea. All biblical. The father of mendacity is Hasatan. They all commit mendacity on his order. So it's not odor of mendacity, which is what Fanny gave us, but it's the order of mendacity. Man, that looks like it's deep. One old guy. Thank you for the nice dono. I don't know what any of that really means. Mystery Babylonian leader? Have to look it up. Thank you, one old guy, for the dono. Hey, and Real Norman Smith, thank you for the update and the analysis, Rob. Thank you, Real Norman Smith. Lots of reading today. We had lots of reading today, but I thought that they were good updates for us. So thanks for sticking with us as we got through them. Real Norman Smith. And we're glad that you're here. Elections are important, man. Without these elections, without real elections, we're not even governing ourselves. We're just slaves to the fraudsters. Yeah, it's not good. Hey, Turbo, what's going on? Stars in the house. Sadie's joining. Oh my goodness. This doesn't look good. Tornadoes. Midwest is saturated. Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin have quite a few of these. Not this one yet, close, just west of us. A huge storm is on the rise. Yeah, all the tornado watchers and the weather bros are out there. They have awesome channels, man. And like, look at these numbers, 132,000 live. Man, prayers up for everybody who's following this. Yeah. Tornado Alley is going wild, right? Thank you, Sadie. Hopefully you're safe. Stay safe. And give us an update tomorrow. Hey, Amy Ann, Rattlenberger, Spam Burger, nothing left. $9 a pound hamburger. From Amy Ann. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. In Georgia, a little north in Virginia. All the things. Let's see what's going on here from Star. You know, this fraud crap makes me as livid as the corruption makes you. But make no mistake, I get as angry as you about the corruption too. Like, when will these people start being arrested? I've dealt with these morons across the aisle for a year. So sick and tired of hearing, LOL, the courts have seen 60 cases and found no fraud ever, you stupid cultist. So I saw some other idiot on X posted about that. He's like, you have no brain if you think 2020 was stolen. I'm like, have you looked into it at all? They don't even look into it. They just like take what Jake Tapper tells them. There's no evidence of widespread fraud. And they just take it and run with it. So sick of explaining they were dismissed. The evidence was never even looked at. I even had a guy who actually voted for Trump tell me he wasn't going to vote for that lunatic Kerry Lake. I had to break it to him that he was a moron. Good for you. Did he not know how government works, how stupid he was to vote Trump and then turn around and vote for Gallego, a senator that will cancel out every last thing Trump does when Kerry would have stood behind him? Like, how stupid are you? As for good news, I've got some. Tons of patriots showed up to the Texas board meeting hearing this time. Let's go. Push back bigly on those nasty care psychos. Big win. Passed numerous amendments, putting patriotism back on our textbooks, loyalty for Texas, and love for our country. Congratulations to us. I hear a song coming on. Love you too, and little generic brand. Thank you. We don't know what's coming out in July. We don't know. So little generic brand baby coming out soon. And then we'll find out the truth. Star, amazing. Shout out to you. Thank you for getting involved in Texas and going to your school board meetings and making your voice heard and showing up in support of that. We need a lot more of that. But yeah, no, we're going to be here. Once those indictments come, it's going to be like a glorious day. Glorious, glorious day. Hey, Turbo. Rob, have you ever considered that the Bush-Gore hanging Chad fiasco with Jeb Bush as Florida governor was a psyop to discredit paper ballots as antiquated so that they could pave the way for the age of dominion? No, not as a psyop, but that's interesting. So they wanted to manufacture that. Yeah, interesting. No, I don't remember. I mean, I remember that, but I don't remember that like coming across as a psyop to me. But yeah, like universal mail-in balloting, COVID, like that all I think was a total operation to just create mass panic, a mass psychosis, a frenzy. And then in that frenzy of you're going to die, we get to change all of the rules and you'll just sit there and eat it because you're too worried about dropping dead from the overly exaggerated effects of their, virus. Hey, thank you for that. And Rubos, happy anniversary to the Rubos in the house. Dan says it was a urinal. It was to urinate in for men. No way to flush down Trump ballots. It was a urinal. Well, they could put it in the toilets, no way to flush down the Trump ballots Fannie wouldn't take them into the men's room. She would take them into the women's room and they'd flush them all down those toilets. So regarding a 2020 election in Fulton County at the State Farm Arena, I think I think we were joking about that, Dan, but you're giving us the details. It was actually a urinal that was a water main break. Well, maybe Fanny isn't telling us something. Off-label pod. You're going to see more of the tornado stories this summer. It's going to be a hot one. So much the news is talking about El Nino and not climate change. That's interesting. Well, I hope it's mild. I hope it's a mild season, or if they come through, they just go through the unpopulated areas and there's, we turn around and we say, oh, much ado about nothing. But I know they can be devastating and probably horrifying too. I lived in Arizona. We didn't have anything like that. No earthquakes, no tsunamis, just hot, scorching, death, simmering cauldron of death and hell in like July and August. That's all. But we knew it was coming every year, so we could just survive it. The Rubos, happy anniversary to our friends, the Rubos. You know where to find them at rubossaltshop.com. Check it out. Get the best salt you've ever had in your whole life. Shout out to my beloved wife, Cheryl Lynn, celebrating 34 years of pure, blissful marriage and matrimony today. Not even a single fight at all. I love you forever. The Rubos, man, good to have you guys. I hope you're doing something fun, enjoying each other's 34 years of marriage. Congratulations to you both. That's a long time. Many more to come. And really glad to have you both here. So congratulations on 34 years of marriage and happy anniversary to you both. Nacho Mama, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. I know we were talking about Charlie this morning. And Trump, I think, is at a TP USA event right now. I think speaking or just got finished speaking. Nacho Mama, thank you for being here 20 months as a member. Prayers up for Charlie. We miss him a lot. Jay Marino, you know, I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, but I think I throw off a few lumens. I just can't comprehend what is the end game of the constitutional coup d'etat. It began with Obama and supported by all the branches of federal, state, and local governments and Orwellian MSM. The seditious conspiracy continues to this day with Boasberg. The end games of Lenin, Hitler, Mao, and Robespierre were all obvious. This just can't be about little Donald Trump. What is the end game? I can't see it. It's the destruction of America. It's the enslavement of America. America is the last bastion of freedom. We have the First Amendment. No other countries have that. We have the Second Amendment. No other countries have that. We have Fourth Amendment protections, which are being eviscerated out of existence with FISA and this slow encroachment of, you know, a little security. Give up a little liberty. It will give you a little security. Benjamin Franklin warned against that. So they want total control of the population. And the Americans who defend those things and stand up for those things, they want to minimize that population, okay, water down the actual Americans with foreigners who don't care about those values at all, and basically breed the country out of existence. And then you have what you see in basically the history of the world, which is an oligarchy, or a better term would be a plutocracy, or a kleptocracy, which is a government of the thieves, for the thieves, exploiting the population, or the plutocracy, which is a government by the wealthy. So your civil rights, your civil liberties, your God-given natural rights that are codified in the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution, those are all impediments to total control. So if you can slowly chip away at them and hollow out the country, then it's going to be the same as, you know, many of these other dictatorships. That's ultimately, I think, the end game. And it's the people in charge who are seizing more power. They get to the top, they lift the ladders up so nobody else can get up there. And then the rest of us are just slaves who get our UBI, and we just follow whatever they say. And we live as slaves under a essential dictatorship, which is, it's the story of history. It's as old as time. So America is an impediment to that. They want a one world system. They want UN control. They want interfacing with the rest of the world. And they don't want America to be America because it's damning to their system of global control. So that's the end game. And like Donald Trump was a big threat to that, which is why they pulled out all the stops to try to take him out, including weaponizing the government, opening the borders, and the list goes on and on. So I think it's pretty simple as it's a power structure. And there's a great book on this by, I can't remember it, but it's a great book. I'll remember it some other time. Tammy Yeaton, what's up? May isn't getting any action, so she's obsessed with it. Mai isn't getting any action, so she's obsessed with it. Who's Mai? Hey, Rick D. Hey, Rob. Turbo is right. Florida did start it following Bush Gore. Said Florida decided to revamp all of this. Boom. They couldn't have the paper ballots. So then, but do you think it was a psyop? Like, do you think it was intended to cause this problem and then everybody reacted to that? Or do you think it was just, a problem with the hanging chads? Like, is there an innocent explanation to it? Or did the CIA screw up those punch cards? We'll have to read that link. Thank you, Rick D. Off label. Hey, remember this summer, it's not the heat that's the problem. It's the humidity. Have fun sweating 5 minutes after walking outside like me in the South. It's pretty funny. I was sitting outside the other day. I think it was like on Tuesday. DC was very hot this week, like abnormally hot. So I'm sitting outside. It's like 80 something degrees. I'm sitting out there like working on show prep, just kind of sitting outside. And somebody walks by and it's like asking, it's like, it's a hot one out here. I'm like, it is? Like, yeah. I was like, feels pretty good to me. I'm like, I'm from Arizona. We're used to a lot hotter than this. So, but it's the humidity. In Arizona, it's a dry heat. But anyways, I was here last summer in July for that event. And yeah, it was hot. The camera failed after 15 minutes, remember? We made a video and the camera failed, kept failing. So thank you, Off Label. It's going to be a fun experience. Can't wait for it. Hey, what's going on, Dan? Identified at about 6 a.m., cleaned up in 1/2 hour. It was the day before the election day, the urinal story. Not a water main break, just a little water mess cleaned up with mops. Oh, that's interesting because we played the clip here many times from the news anchors like, oh, there's a water main break or whatever, a water leak or whatever they said. It was enough to stop the count. So somebody had a little overflow in one of the urinals. Yeah, that's a good reason to stop the count. Perfect. Dan, each of the problematic Florida counties of 2000 were controlled by Democrat political parties. The election officials couldn't clean out the chads from the holding trays from prior elections. So probably the CIA. That sounds about right. Thank you, Dan. Jay Marino, I completely agree with you, but I don't want to be labeled QAnon. I don't think that's QAnon at all. I think the guy's name is Peter Turchin. Is that his name? Yes, that's it. Just came to me. Peter Turchin. It's called End Times. Great book. Highly recommend it. And he talks about elites, counter elites, and the path of political disintegration. And he kind of goes through the story of history and like how every society just kind of evolves into this plutocracy, which is a government by the wealthy for the wealthy. And there was a great clip. Remember Chamath Palihapitiya from the All In podcast? He was out and he gave a speech one time, a little interview. And somebody asked him, like, what's next for you? Like, you're a billionaire. You've already got all this money. What do you want to do? And he says, basically, I want a seat at the table. He said there's 100 people on the planet who control all the money flows. This clip is still out there. You can listen to it. He said they're all men. They all control the money flows. And they're the global power structure, ultimately. He said, I want a seat at that table. And I think he kind of caught himself. And he's like, what I mean is like, I want a better society. And like moves on to the next topic. But you could kind of see it coming out. So once you reach that status, you want to ensconce your power. And I think that that's a real thing. Like there's a real energy and momentum behind a lot of that. And our founders were smart in that they created a system that was like, they saw that like, this is not new. This is the same thing that they encountered back, 250 years ago. They were going through the same crap. It's the elites versus everybody else, ultimately. And the elites want to consolidate their power. So when they came over here and founded our country, they created a system where you have 3 groups of elites in the government that fight against each other. So they want to undo that. They want the government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch to all just be commingled into one big power structure, which it largely is becoming, unfortunately. And then it can be the elites against everybody else. And then they just lecture us. We're going to give you more. We're going to give you better jobs and give you better things and blah, 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 while they open up the country and then water down the very people who would be the threat to their power, which in my opinion is, heritage Americans, people who care about the Bill of Rights and natural God-given rights versus other people who they import who come from other places that don't share those values. And they can just disintegrate the structure of America right out from under us, which is why we get so irritated about immigration, because that's, I think, what it is all about. And then they vote themselves more raises. The government will just give them a pittance. Elon's talking now about universal basic income to destroy your purpose, to destroy your identity. I love Elon, but to destroy your will. Like, why would you get up in the morning and do anything if you just get a check? To just kind of sap your innovative, experience from your life and ultimately destroy the country, really. And why wouldn't they want to do that? So we become like all of the other, emasculated European countries, it's like ridiculous. So I don't think it's conspiracy. I think it's just reality, unfortunately, which is why we have to fight back against it and demand that that does not happen to our country, which we're not going to let happen. All right, friends, it has been a beautiful stream. Thank you for being here and for joining us on this lovely Friday. I hope your weekend is outstanding and you are doing something fun and accomplishing all the rest, relaxation, and restoration that you need to get in this week. Hey, Neuro D, good to see you. Sharing it over on X. Join the watchers on Locals. We do members-only streams in the morning. We have a great watchers community on Locals, also on YouTube. Thank you, Neuro D. Did you hear the reporting on the Progs that the SCOTUS are slow-walking their descent to the Louisiana voting case? Yeah, I did. Yeah, the longer that the dissenters can delay it, then the closer we get to the elections and the Purcell principle comes into play and nobody can change anything because we're too close to the election. Hey, Jesse, what's up? It's amazing that the evidence of their cheating has been locked away and they thought they could keep people's eyes off of it forever. I'm with you on that, Jesse. Yeah. And they would have, by the way. Like if Trump didn't win this and we didn't have a lot of pushback and a lot of people now speaking out and continuing to stay on this stuff, it is coming out. And I think the truth is going to continue to come out. Like J6ers, many people are going to be vindicated as more and more comes out. Tulsi's releasing things and we have to stay on it. So we will. Thank you, Jesse. And Al Holman, thank you, Al. Another great week of reporting. Thank you, Al. Yeah, we had some good stories this week. I mean, some weeks are slower than others, but we had some good updates. And so thank you, Al, for checking us out over on X. And hey, Jay Marino, you should be on Gutfeld. I learn a lot from you for free. That's right. We should be on Gutfeld. You hear that, Greg? We're waiting for our invite. So hopefully he sends that message now that he's heard us. So thank you, Jay Marino. One day, perhaps we'll get over there. Should be fun. Thank you, Jay Marino. All right. So friends, we'll pause here for the day. It has been a beautiful week. Thank you so much for joining us and for being here, for subscribing if you haven't already done that, because we don't ever want to miss you again, and for liking the video on the way out. And we'd appreciate that help and love because I think it helps with the algorithm or something. So thank you for that. Otherwise, we're going to pause here. Big thank yous to our amazing mods and meme smiths. We're going to send our YouTube friends over to Jim Tells You, so hang tight on that one. Thank yous go out to John in the house. What's up? Donut Mind Me. We got Muffin Rando. Big shout outs to K Bean, to Carrie B, to Neuro D, to Janek, to Dog Digger on the Rumbles. We got Geegum Geegum, Elliot, and Just Rhonda modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and beautiful and orderly. And this weekend, hopefully it's enjoyable, restorative, relaxing, rejuvenating, because we're coming back here on Monday and we're going to get into it again. And in order to do all of this appropriately, of course, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful weekend. Sleep very well. We'll see you right back here on Monday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through